You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
The flip side of the Great Resignation, we've all heard about the Great Resignation, right? Just people quitting in droves because they can. That's the kind of labor market we've got. I don't really need to work for this employer. I can go out and do my own thing, or I can get a better job over here. Great Resignation. The flip side of that is that we've got a small business boom. How much of a boom? Applications for new businesses, like 5 million new businesses were launched between January and November. That's up about 55% from 2019. And why is that? Well, we've got this transition of the way that we're doing things, and a lot of these businesses, with the whole COVID thing, we've done things differently. We've done them remote. We've had the technology to do things remote for a long, long time, but haven't necessarily done it. Pandemic comes along, and there's all these new businesses that are being created that are handling all of the things that we didn't really have set up because we weren't really doing business remotely. We were pretending like, we're going to drop some stuff on Dropbox and, look at us go. Had some of those situations. But when the pandemic came, and governments basically said, you all need to stay home and work remotely. That's when the push comes to shove, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies. I read the news from that perspective. Now, why are we talking about the Great Resignation and a small business boom on a real estate channel? And I always kind of try and give that input. Because the way that folks are able to afford homes is through employment. And so when you've got a kind of a big shift or a big change going with employment, these are self-employed folks because these new businesses are being started. But more importantly, a lot of these are businesses that are going to employ people down the road. That's why we're talking about that. Employment, major determinant of demand for real estate. Because if people are employed, they can go out and buy homes. If they're not, we've got, different scenario. Let's get into it. All right. This is, believe it or not, this is an NBC article. They wouldn't lead us astray, would they? We're going to read it anyway. Yeah. The media. Have you guys been following kind of what's going on with the media? It is getting weird out there. I mean, Fox's numbers have gone through the roof. Some of their folks are just on fire. CNN, not so much. CNN coming under fire from so many different angles. You had the whole Andy Cohen and Anderson Cooper thing on New Year's Eve. And Andy Cohen, he probably took an edible. He probably drank too much. And he said that he was overserved. But he was crossfaded and he doesn't know how to party. And so he said some stuff, on New Year's Eve thing that probably wasn't appropriate, but the next day he apologized, so it's all good. But what was funny is that CNN was taking some heat because, Anderson Cooper, CNN guy, and the CNN people were saying, we're even getting bad press on this, and Andy Cohen isn't even our guy. He's not even our employee. I think is he with the Bravo network? I don't even know. I don't watch him. I'm familiar with who he is. Certainly know who Anderson Cooper is. But, CNN taking some whacks. Just every time they turn around, it's like, all right, you're reporting on a story that doesn't make any sense at all. And everybody else is reporting these other stories, and they're getting a lot more viewers because people don't trust certain aspects of the media anymore. And that is becoming wildly, wildly apparent. When Joe Rogan has the most watched media in all of the land, that's when you kind of got to go, interesting. What's going on? A surge in new business formation suggests that the coronavirus pandemic has created a landscape in which entrepreneurs and startups can thrive and new innovations can break ground. This time has been really fertile. This is the spin. This is the positive spin on the whole coronavirus thing. This time has been really fertile. We've seen a huge increase in new businesses since the pandemic started, said Julia Pollak, the chief economist at ZipRecruiter. There are more opportunities out there. Some businesses closed, others started up. That's the way it always goes. One of my things, where I started daily podcasting, was out of the coronavirus. It was in March of 2020. I was in my other office with a couple of my guys, and we were kind of getting ready to shut down because we were being told initially that residential real estate was not going to be essential, even though the appraisal, my appraisal company was deemed essential because we basically work on federal forms, and somehow that made us essential. And then residential real estate was deemed essential after being not essential, but National Association of Realtors has a really good lobbying group, and they basically made it clear to our governor that, hey, we need to still sell homes during the pandemic. You can't have that. Commercial real estate guys, not so much. One of the things that happened during that time period was I realized I am not good at staying at home. I am not good at, not doing anything for large periods of time. And that's what I was envisioning because that's what we were told was going to happen. So I started daily podcasting due to the coronavirus. So, there you go. I mean, lots of opportunity. And I didn't expect anything really that big to come out of it. And then while I was doing that, didn't have many viewers, didn't have many downloads, like very few. But I didn't care. I was doing something that I enjoyed and I still enjoy doing. And then the whole CHOP thing came along, and I ran down there with the GoPro on a Sunday afternoon, and then it kind of just exploded. And then, here we are. So literally, I am doing this and have had huge shifts in my business because of the coronavirus and the impacts that it was going to maybe have to my companies. Little did I know the residential real estate was going to shoot to the moon because of the coronavirus. I mean, who knew? And it's not exactly because a whole bunch of people got infected that residential real estate, I mean, that's a broad term, but if you've been here, you understand kind of the concepts of why residential real estate is done as well as it has. Whereas commercial, not so much. We don't need as much office space anymore. And so here we are. So there are more opportunities out there, and there's always opportunities, even when things are super dark. You know what? If I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to start podcasting because this is kind of something I want to do. I know that nobody's going to pay attention because why would they? So I'm just going to start uploading podcasts on stuff that I want to talk about, and we're just going to see where it goes. And because if nothing else, it's going to keep me active, going to keep my mind going, and then I won't get in trouble, right? I mean, that's literally, it's like, no, I just don't want to be a slug and sit at home working that remote because I am not good at that. So there's opportunities out there. Government data shows a record gap between the number of job openings and the number of employed people, 11 million versus 7.4 million. Job openings, 11 million. Number of unemployed people, 7.4 million. You got this massive gap. And I don't trust all those numbers, and I know you don't either, but they're kind of a guideline. When they get into the millions, you're like, okay, we can't be, maybe we're 500,000 off, something like that, but can't be all that wrong. But interpretation is always everything, right? All right, what do you see within this data? Well, that's a headache of epic proportions for hiring managers and human resource directors. Economists and labor markets experts say there is a significant silver lining. Something good. We're going to show the positive here. Our glass is going to be half full, not half empty. The Census Bureau's business formation statistics data set, that sounds fascinating, doesn't it? Yeah. Data set shows a surge in the number of people filing tax paperwork to start new businesses. All right. Interesting. From January through November, just under 5 million new business applications were submitted, a jump of 55% over the same period in 2019. Remember, when we were rolling in Q4 of 2019 and Q1 of 2020, the economy was roaring. It was going. And that was, some of what I think people were trying to, if Trump had good economic numbers going into that election, I truly believe it would have been game over, but that didn't happen. We had the whole coronavirus and things just got rocked, right? I mean, we're shut down the economy. We're opening the economy. Yeah, you can go to work. You can't go to work. Essential, non-essential. just a whole bunch of that stuff, and it's going to rock the financial numbers, right? What's more, a significant number of them are what the Census Bureau refers to as high propensity applications. I've never heard that term before, but apparently it's a thing, which means they're likely to create new jobs. That's the bottom line. All right, these are a few big themes happening, said 𝑺𝒂𝒕𝒕𝒍𝒆, the CEO of Dave Partners. That's a good name. I can pronounce that name. Dave Partners. Where do you work? Dave Partners. All right. Are you Dave? Nah, I'm partner though. Dave Partners is a recruiting firm focused on the tech industry. There's a large amount of money that's going into venture-backed startups. Much of it is driven by the ascendance of digitally native consumers. What does that mean? Just means people on computers working remotely, right? Digitally native consumers and workers, we're not supposed to say workers anymore, employees, and the pandemic did the rest. The way people want to operate and the way that they think is changing, and the new technology companies that are developing these technologies and systems facilitate that. 𝒂𝒕𝒍𝒆 said, the way that these people think is totally different from past generations. What this pandemic has done is accelerated a lot of these behavioral patterns. It is quite a catalyst. And I think you're on the front end of seeing that transition of all of these companies. Like, yeah, you know what? We've had the technology to do this, but we haven't until we've had just that little push, just that little scooch towards the door of, all right, you need to enter that opportunity and go take a look at that. And when the pandemic hit, that was one of those more than just a little prod, a little push. It was like, all right, this is the time frame. We're going to do it. Frank Monaka, Frank, a certified mentor at 𝒂𝒕𝒂𝒕, a program that offers executive mentoring for entrepreneurs, said that the pandemic opened an unexpected window of opportunity for people hungry to go into business for themselves. What it did is it gave them was the time to reassess the future of work in their life. He said, adding that the two most popular 𝒂𝒕𝒂𝒕 workshops are in business fundamentals and social media marketing. Because if you're sitting at home, not working, you're like, okay, I'm an employee of a company that I am shut down for. I don't really want to continue working for them, but I'm going to keep working for them as long as I get a paycheck. But since I'm not working right now, what can I be doing to better myself? Well, there's like 5 million businesses that decided this is the time to crank up. Danielle Neal, a second grade teacher in Baltimore, worked with 𝒂𝒕𝒂𝒕 mentors to hone her business skills. I love teaching, but it was time for me to leave, essentially, she said. So she resigned in May when the school year ended to turn what had been a side project, we got a side hustle here going, helping small businesses navigate social media into a full-time enterprise. See a lot of that. And there is a real need for folks in the social media end of things because everything has gone that way, right? We don't really do print media anymore. Real estate used to be just loaded up with print media, advertisements in newspapers. When's the last time you opened a newspaper? I do fairly often because I still like them, but I understand that most people, and me included, I get a print and I get an online subscription because I'm old school and I like to hold a newspaper. I like to get my hands, coated with newspaper print, which makes them kind of feel shiny and just you got something on your fingers and then you need to go wash that off and it becomes all gray because you got newspaper print on your hands. I like the old school newspaper, but a lot of folks don't. They're big. They're on paper. So you've got a huge push into social media. That's one of many, many businesses out there that, with the way things have gone digitally, working remote, everything online, that's one angle. That's one tiny angle. The market is there. Small business owners want to put themselves out there, but they don't understand the social media world. It's true. You got to wear a lot of hats in today's market because not only do you have Business 101, you've got the whole social media world, and those worlds are not necessarily one and the same, but social media skills are now becoming they're a requisite. So you either need to have somebody that understands that and has that skill set, or you need to develop it yourself. And I think it's important for people to develop them, at least a broad understanding of how social media works, because then you as the business owner, you're the one that's going to be telling people, all right, I don't exactly understand what it is that you're doing with this one little piece, but here's my broad scope. Here's what I'm seeing long-term for that project. Now you go and make it happen. That's kind of what needs to happen, right? So long-term, I'd like to hire people. I want to own my own agency with other employees. This is the teacher turned social media manager. For some worker bees, the turning point, I think we need to change that for some employee bees. The turning point was seeing their work responsibilities multiply in the wake of the pandemic. The pressure of juggling simultaneous office-based and online programs when her Florida-based employer reopened prompted Chelsea Kidd to come to a realization. We have an aha moment coming up here, right? I was back in the office and was also supporting a lot of virtual initiatives. It had been a pretty challenging two-pronged approach to work, she said. You realize you're working overtime every week. If you're doing it, you may as well be doing it to make your own company. All right, that's fair enough. But I think people go into owning their own business with just such rose-colored glasses. This is going to be the best thing ever. I'm going to have more flexibility to spend time with my family. And in the end, for the first few years, if your company makes it, you're going to have less time, and you're going to have less time to spend with your family, and you're going to have more responsibility, and you're going to get paid less. That's not being a Debbie Downer. That is that's just business, especially startup, something small where you're a one-man show or a one-woman show and you're trying to crank things up. You're going to work twice as many hours getting that bad boy going because the fear of failure will drive you to work harder. That's just bottom line, right? So people do really well when they first crank up their businesses. It's when they get to that sticking point and they've kind of lost their traction and they don't have the ability to pivot. That's when you see a lot of businesses, restaurants particularly, small businesses like that. It's like, all right, you need to pivot here somehow. What are you going to do? And that's when you kind of filter out who's got what it takes to make it and then who doesn't have what it takes to make it. All right, you failed. You're still going. Okay, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't quit. That's the bottom line for so many of these businesses, right? Kidd, who was also mentored by SCORE, resigned in late 2020 and moved from South Florida to Montana this year to launch SiteWell Solutions, a wellness consulting business focusing on remote workers. This has become such a thing with the pandemic. So back in the day, call it all the way up to 2011, I had some pretty big office space, not huge, but like 2,500 square feet. I mean, decent sized space for a couple of companies. And in 2011, I started looking and analyzing the numbers on how much I was paying for rent, how much I was paying for utilities, how much I was paying for all this other stuff. And my businesses had kind of morphed to the point where most everybody was working from home because we had high-speed internet at that point in time. We'd had it for like 10 years. We first started sending out appraisals via PDF format, not hand delivering them. But in 2001, we started sending them over the internet as a PDF attached to email. 10 years later, 2011, I decided to take both my companies basically online and not really have a physical presence anymore. So you've been able to do this for years and years. I was told that you couldn't have a real estate business without having an office. That was incorrect. So many of these things are just things that people have in their head. Here's why you can't do a business. And they focus on that instead of focusing on, here's how we're going to make this go. So, there's a lot of solutions out there that, we worked through. Where's our central data going to be? Or if we do have a meeting, what does that look like? Or how are we going to communicate because we're not coming into an office anymore? Are we going to lose that ability to talk with our coworkers? What does that look like? From a management standpoint, I'm the owner of a company. I've got a manager. I don't see her every day. What does that look like? How do we make that work? All these questions that go on. So you got a wellness consulting business focusing on remote workers. That's pretty legit. Big demand for that now, right? COVID hit the accelerator for that. Just all of a sudden. All right, this isn't an option. We are forced to be working from home now. How do we make that go? Go out and buy a lot of at-home office furniture, right? So I've been in corporate wellness for about 15 years, and I was just ready to take that leap, she said. Monica said, the other thing I think is a permanent change is the ability to work at home. It broadens the workforce in many ways. Yes, it does. But there's a downside to working at home too. There's a real downside. And people don't focus on that, I think, as much because people they want to work at home until they don't. And I think we're at a point in the pandemic where people are like, oh, I sure wish I could go back to the office. That sandwich shop that I used to go to, if it's even there, I would love to go get a sandwich, maybe just once a week. Maybe I go into the office once a week. That's if the company you still work for has office space. So many of them been like, we're going to give it up to a sublet. We don't really need that much space. Crazy stuff like that going on the daily, right? The uncoupling of demand for talent lied to particular locations isn't just good for entrepreneurs. It's also promising from a macroeconomic standpoint. Now, here's our rosy spin, right? Researchers say one of the factors that contributed to a tepid and uneven recovery after the Great Recession was a lack of new business development. Well, the whole thing just got shellacked. So it's no wonder, start a new business? I don't think so. I'm still trying to hold on to what little bits and pieces I have left after the Great Recovery, after the Great Recession. And that's the way I see a lot of entrepreneurs. They got so whacked during the Great Recession that it wasn't like, I think I'll start a new business today. So you had an entire generation that were trying to hold on and still make things go. And you had to wait for the kind of the new generation to, all right, I don't really remember the Great Recession that much. I was too young. I heard the old people talking about it, but that's not really going to impact me because why would it? New times. Let's go. The current startup surge is also a tremendous benefit for some of the many workers who took advantage of the disruption the pandemic generated to take the next steps in their career paths. So it was that little bit of the nudge, right? It was that little bit of, all right, here's what you're going to do. I think what shifted is post-pandemic. Are we post-pandemic? No, we're still right in the middle of it. We're in the worst of it. You seen some of the cases? I mean, they are just sky high. They are just shooting to the moon. I think we had 7,500 cases here in the state of Washington on like Monday, something like that. It was just like, wow, that is a spike in the number of cases, right? Not the number of deaths, not the number of hospitalizations, just a spike in cases. I think what shifted is post-pandemic, this whole concept of remote only opened up a world of new opportunities, said Anand. I'm not even going to pronounce that last name. Can't do it. Yep. Who left a job where he had worked for 6 years because greater acceptance of telecommuting gave him opportunities beyond Ames, Iowa, where he lives. This guy with the name I can't pronounce said that he had good relationships with colleagues and management at his old job, but he recently took a job at a startup based in New York City with a dispersed workforce of about 24. In terms of my career, where I wanted to go, my personal journey is my personal journey. I cringe when I hear that. I just do. It's like, really? Is it a journey or is it your series of jobs? I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little too harsh on the touchy-feely because I do come from a business background and we tend to, especially way back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, terms like personal journey, you kind of made fun of. But all right, let's go with it. My personal journey is I wanted to experience a startup from the ground floor, he said. I wanted to learn how to build a marketing team. I'm going in with the right attitude to learn. Okay, great. Carvajal said the fierce competition for talent gives workers the confidence to take gambles on high-stake gigs or decide to go it alone. There's enough demand out there right now for services that you can put together a startup that may not have made it in other markets because you've got this built-in demand. It's kind of like doing a crappy remodel on a house right now. It's going to sell no matter what because there's so few homes for sale, right? If you've got a business in place that offers services that are even on the peripheral, they're like, okay, you're probably going to make it because there's so much demand out there right now for this type of thing. And that's what we're saying is you can take a risk on stuff and it's probably going to work out in your favor. Whereas 5 years ago, if you did that same remodel on a house, well, it might sit for a while and then you might have to reduce the price. And then you don't really have a positive profit house flip. You've got a 6-month project that you got paid wages on. You've got businesses that are starting up right now that there's enough demand for that they can probably get through that first year of startup, just cluster, you know what, that's going to happen and get through it and make it on to being a viable business. Whether or not it's profitable, who knows? So many of these businesses just take on massive amounts of startup capital, don't they? And, profit. Who needs that? We've got startup capital behind us. We're going to take over the world. So in a recession economy, people tend to stay in their jobs longer and they will tolerate being underemployed because there aren't a lot of opportunities out there. And the one they've got is looking pretty shiny to them. But we're in a market right now where people are like, yeah, we've got the biggest number of people quitting jobs and moving and all new businesses starting. And, it's crazy, right? All this transition going on. In the economy we're in right now, people feel so secure that they're really kind of reaching and aspiring for the bigger jobs, bigger growth, and bigger opportunities. Be interesting to see when the market normalizes, whatever that is, how many of these companies are they able to make it? I hope so, but there's always a big percentage. I hope so from the standpoint of I like to see people taking risks. I like to see people doing something that they really want to do. The thing that I caution people on is this really for you? Do you really have the temperament? Do you really have the personality to make this go? And if a lot of people took a good, hard look at themselves, they might come up with, you know what? Maybe it's not for me, but I've got the concept and maybe I need to team up with a partner and bring that skill set in, something along those lines. Because not everybody is built for going out and cranking up a business and having it succeed. I'm not trying to say, hey, don't do that. I'm just saying, hey, be realistic with what you're looking at, what you're getting into. Make sure that it's viable for you. Because even though everybody else is doing it, quitting, starting up startups, or maybe it seems like that, or somebody's startup just got $25 million in funding and, it makes a different version of the ice cube. I don't know. I'm completely making that up, but that's kind of as ridiculous as I see a lot of these business ventures. It's like, okay, they just got 50 million for that and they haven't turned a profit and they're doing what? All right, maybe I should go out and do that. And then I think to myself, no, I have no business doing that. Maybe I do. I don't know. I'm just podcasting right now. Okay. So that's where we sit. 5 million new jobs. Not 5 million new jobs, 5 million new businesses. You've got a real trend going on there. And this trend will continue as long as we've got these low interest rates and things kind of going crazy the way they've been going. At some point in time, like the real estate market, you will have a slowdown, and that's when the rubber hits the road. But until then, I think you're going to see a lot of this. I think you're going to see a lot of this stuff go on in 2022 because there's no market conditions that I can see that are going to put a real huge kibosh on this, especially companies that are focusing on the whole online thing. We're just moving in that direction, right? I mean, we just know it. We're not moving towards everybody back to the office. This Omicron variant, that's really put a damper on big companies moving back to the office, hasn't it? Everybody's looking around going, well, they're indefinitely saying that they're going to work from home. We don't want to be that one company that sends all our employees back to the office and they all get the newest variant because it's really contagious. We don't want to be that company. So the whole back to the office thing, Yeah, it's got the brakes tapped a little bit. Tappity tap, right? Here we are. COVID. Who knew? Crazy. Now we're going into 2022. Happy New Year, by the way. I was going to do a bunch of end of year stuff, but yeah, then I got Omicron, got COVID, and that kind of really put a damper on my end of year plans, like attending Christmas, family holidays and things like that. I sat at home and felt sorry for myself and watched television, as you do. Maybe I should have started yet another company. No, I just didn't feel good. So, all right, that's it for me on this one. New businesses being started. Opportunities are always out there is the bottom line. Just a matter, do you want to take it? Do you want to go do it? It's going to be hard work. Maybe it works out. Maybe it doesn't. But maybe you're that person that you're like, hey, 2022, that's my year. I'm going to go start a business. Maybe it's part-time. Make it part-time. Have that salary, whatever that job is you've got going right now. Let that feed you. Let that cover your expenses till you get up and rolling. And then you figure it out from there. That's the fun part. Oh, hey, this business actually might succeed and it might actually make money. Maybe I can pay back my investors. Who knows? 2022, opportunity. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for being part of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. I will catch up with you soon. Until then, stay safe. We'll talk again. Bye for now.